Beautiful humans, happy Monday, and welcome back to the Embodied Masculinity exploration that Massimo and I are on for the year of 2022. Today, we have with us our beautiful friend, Tom Fortes-Meyer, who is doing beautiful work in the world of like inner child healing, of NLP, discovering masculinity, and what does it mean to really step into kingship. So he's a speaker, author, writer, father to amazing children. And yeah, I met Tom a year and a half back now in a mastermind retreat. And like the moment Tom and I met you was like, there's some beautiful energy, and I feel there's something to be co-created. And so we're currently speaking about co-creating a number of retreats throughout this year. So stay tuned in that space as well. Tom, really pleased to have you here with us today.
I'm so pleased to be here.
Yeah, just before we were coming on, Tom was speaking about the good men test that he developed. So Tom, if you would just step in there and speak about this, and then we're looking at what does it mean to actually grow into kingship? Because I think especially saying to grow into it is this like this process of evolving into is I feel something that we'll get more into today.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for me, it's a little bit of context, bit of background. Like I've seen with great joy to see this massive movement over the last few years of the divine feminine rising and the sisterhood becoming like super supportive of each other, which has been an amazing thing to see, more so than I've ever seen before. People truly, sincerely, coming together to just wish their sisters the very best. And within that, so much up-leveling in awareness and understanding and practice and rituals. And I think, because I've been exposed to that directly, but also with my partner, who's been on a profound journey of that for a few years, I think I could articulate what the divine feminine is quite well. I mean, don't give me a quiz or test or anything, but I think if I had to, I think I'd be able to. But I don't feel quite as able to do that around what is divine masculinity. And I felt as I have seen my partner growing into her power, what I noticed was I had old patriarchal ideas about what femininity is. And they were wrong. They were wrong and not helpful. And so it was like, oh, okay. So not only do I want to help understanding, kind of articulating for myself and everyone else, the men, like, what does it look like? Like, what are we moving towards? Like, what role models have we got of divine masculinity in the world? I can think of 30 divine feminines rocking it in the world, easy off the top of my head. And I know loads of men who are working towards feeling that they're in their divine kingship or their divine masculine. And I see flavors and fragments of it all the time. But I don't have images or identities or icons of that being fully embodied. And so for me, as I approach eldership, and for all the men who are just becoming men, I'm like, we should be really clearly articulated. And like, what helps? Like, what are the practical things we can do? And also, what's the way to assess ourselves? So I began thinking about, it started off as an idea of so many women on my containers are like, where are all the good men? Where are all the spiritual self-aware men who are still masculine? Like they're searching for like these meditating Vikings, And I was like, And I was asked by a friend a while ago who was going speed dating, like, I've got 2 minutes to assess people. What are the most important questions you could ask someone in 2 minutes that would give you actual, useful, practical indicators as to whether they're, it's not about good or a bad person, but someone that's, worth partnering with romantically, right? And so since that moment, I've been really fascinated with what are the things? What are the indicators of goodship, And so it's culminated these last few weeks. I've just completed it. Yeah, it's like a 40 question. It's not like a magazine quiz. It's like a really searching look into your psychology and your relationship to yourself, your relationship to your story, your narrative, how you are in a relationship and in partnership, where you are at with addiction and all these different indicators. And I noticed, I made one of these for emotional intelligence before, and it's probably a third of it is all around emotional intelligence. But one of the questions which is shared in my emotional intelligence test and this, good man test is when you're mad.
Can you give us a bit of a snippet as to what that is? Because you've got some spectacular programs that you're busy running.
Yeah. So the Good Man program is going to be it's forming, but the what I was running last year was a whole bunch of personal development things around inner child healing and emotional intelligence. But this on the point of this question, there's one question which is when you're angry, can you express without being mean? Can you, do you say hurtful things on purpose to hurt? Or can you just stay in the realm of truth and fairness, which can still be incredibly painful, but you're not purposefully hurting? It's a really indicator of toxicity and emotional intelligence and anger management. And I'm usually really, really good at that. Generally, it's not something I do, but every now and again, right, it can happen. Especially if you're in a fight with someone who's doing it, right? If they're doing it, then it's really hard not to sometimes. But I noticed when I was writing that quiz, I had to answer it honestly, and I had done it like 2 weeks before, and I was arguing with my partner, and I felt the pull to be a bit mean, and because I was so attached to getting a better score next time I did the questionnaire.
You held yourself accountable.
I actually was like, I don't want to be that guy. So these assessment tools they actually can really inspire us to try and strive. That's what I want to know. I want to be able to say, being a decent human is like, so many men are operating from the idea that as long as they're not putting their penis inside another woman, they're not being unfaithful. And that's just not the case. There's so many other ways of being unfaithful and leaking, and the way you're engaging with people in certain ways. And it's like, we need to improve our understanding of that vocabulary, right? There's probably 5 unnamed terms for the type of way you can communicate on Facebook when you're creating connection, and yet it isn't wholly honoring of your relationship, right? And where does it go from one to the other? And how do we know? And how can we be mindful? And how can we have conversations? And how can we hold ourselves accountable to a higher standard? We have to understood what that higher standard is and have a vocabulary of understanding, and ideally the support of other people around us, men and women, who also know what that is. So they can say, you know what, that was a bit leaky,
I wonder.
I think that's connecting to sort of this whole kingship idea and the, I feel, strength of boundaries and that high ideal of an archetype in a way. And maybe you can speak a bit more into that, what kingship means to you and where leakiness or like what these dimensions of leakiness are and how to mitigate that.
Well, I think, the archetypes are ways in which we can turn up, right? And there are ways of being that are fairly standard, right? And so that we have these modes. But it's interesting, so I love playing with the different ways to describe the work you do. I might even describe my work in different ways, with different people, right? And one of the things, and we call it growing into kingship, right? For me, the king is an archetype, which is the incredibly, the warrior sleeps with one eye open. They have a sword under the pillow. They've still got armor on completely. They're good to go. And they might be fighting for love or fighting for a cause or fighting to defend those needing defending, but they're still fighting. And seems to just he's back. He probably went off to fight a noble cause, but there's still fight there, right? And I like the idea of the king. He sleeps in silk, and it's not that he has guards at his door, it's he runs the kingdom so well, so beautifully as a servant leader that no one wants to assassinate him. There are no guards posted at the walls of his castle. And so, but what was interesting, there was quite a large backlash to my use of the term kingship. And one of the images I use, which you've used on the promo for this, is a hot older guy like in a suit, right? But he's got armor on part of him, and his weapon's sheathed. And I really resonate with that. I'm trying to have less and less and less armor I don't walk around with my weapon out. I'm trying to, it's like, it's more ceremonial, right? But I still have some armor. I still have some pain. And if you try and break into my house and hurt my kids, I will chop your fucking head off. I mean, it's not that I'm not willing to acts of great violence to do what's right. So for me, it's like someone who thinks they're completely armorless in the world. I wouldn't recommend being completely armorless, but the name king for some people evoked monarchy. And that, of course, is deeply steeped in all sorts of awfulness. So for me, kingship is about the archetype of the provider, creator, overseer, big picture. But I think for me, the deepest flavor of the greatest kingship is the energy of fathership. Like if we, and not from a paternalistic, don't worry your pretty little head about it, I'll take care of everything and I'll provide for you, This is where the relationship, a lot of men's relationship to the divine feminine is really flawed, and we think we should move on to that topic. But it's like I love you in the way that a father loves a child, that I'm here and I'll do anything and I will sacrifice myself. It's not the territorial, proprietorial ownership idea of the king. It's the just incredibly loving, not coming from fear warrior, and I think when we raise in that place and we go into that place, it isn't about what we own or what we do even, it's just how we're turning up with love,
I guess one of the difficulties for me is sort of I'm reflecting back to my experiences growing up and growing into my manhood, and I probably never had the how to get to that point. So maybe if that's something that we could also cover is a couple of pointers for the men that are listening, how to get there.
I agree. I mean, I had an amazing conversation that we can post as well with Richard Rudd, who's the creator of Gene Key, right? Amazing. Such an incredibly lovely man. And so I was like, I don't want this to be a theoretical exposition of what it is to be a good man. I was like, you're very, very wise. Tell me what made a difference in your life. What are the practical steps, and for him, he went straight to commitment and fidelity and understanding the difference between emotional infidelity. And he'd had an affair. And so one of his primary piece of advice was staying put and working it out in relationship, like not to just run away and fantasize, but the grass is greener. And, it's like, just like he was like, I was unfaithful. I had an affair. My wife, agreed to stay with me whilst we worked towards forgiveness, which many, many years on they're still working on. But he said it had become the most powerful container for him to be a decent human, to be able to look at his decent human. He said, get a mentor. He worked with an amazing relationship coach who became a kind of long-term mentor for him, who was a wiser, man who had been alive longer and who had a big heart and was a good human. And he's like, help me. So it's someone to talk to in those times of temptation, or someone to talk to at those times of challenge or frustration or despondency. Community, he said, and I agree, all these things where it's like, what are the toxic aspects of masculinity? They're competitive, they're jealous, they're possessive. It's like, it's fear, right? How is fear affecting your choices? How is it driving your ambition? So many men make the mistake of saying, what, I will sacrifice life balance, I will sacrifice happiness, and I'm going to smash it for 5 years. And then when I'm successful, I'll be happy. And of course, that's a terrible idea.
Doesn't arrive.
It doesn't work. It never arrives. And even when it does, if it does, it feels hollow. And, you're brutalized by the journey, right? And it's like, actually, how do I find my happiness and how do I flow from that contentment, not drive myself so hard? So I did something when COVID first hit, was I chose to take my business and my therapeutic transformational model and my attitudes about relationship and my attitudes about money, and I decided to put them on altar of investigation. And the scalpel I used were, how are these fundamentally wrong? How are these fundamentally flawed? And I took an opposing view to my assumptions. And I just think in a world where we have been brought up and our sense of self is based on knowing and being certain, I think that's a really important beginning step as a man to go, you know what, I'm going to pull over and I'm going to ask for directions because I don't know where I am. And someone else probably knows. For a man to be able to admit, I don't know.
Oh, it's soul destroying.
It's a huge step, right? It's a huge step. It's definitely identity destroying, right? It's like, I don't know. And from there, then taking it further to like, I'm going to presume what I know and what I'm certain of is potentially or even probably wrong. Now, truth is, when I did that, most of my stuff held up, right? It wasn't. But I found 2 or 3 things that were right completely off. It's amazing. And that has really, really helped me, feel humble, also explained a lot. And it's led to me changing this direction, to really letting go of some of the things I'm attached to, or because something's working doesn't mean you should continue doing it. It's checking in and listening to what's being called for. And I think what's been concerning me is so much of what has made my masculine better has been coming about learning from the feminine, all the cool feminine stuff. Let go, surrender, connect to nature, be in the chaos of it, have no plan, turn up, see what happens, go with the flow of life, That has become my synonymous spiritual philosophy. But I'm realizing actually no, and it's like it has to be that balance. What are the deeply spiritual aspects of the masculine? Because they have to be equal and balanced. And how do I weave that in? I don't want the idea to be masculine is all just like and hard and destroying the earth and an idiot and and then the feminine comes in and heals everything. It's like, no, what's the healing power of the masculine? Because it has to be balanced.
But I guess you also don't want it to be so high up in the spiritual that it loses its tangibility either.
No. I want it to be really practical, right? I know that's what we talked about that. We're like, you know what? It's like we can have a big philosophical debate about the deepest spiritual stuff, but if it doesn't give people practical steps to enjoy their life more, be a better, decent human. For me as a father, I want to help. I want there to be knowledge in the world so that the men or women that my daughters are dating in the future, they have a better chance of being a decent human. We haven't got a chance of doing that if we don't even know what a decent man is. I think
what's
just as a final part on that, I just think one of the things is I think the bar has been. This is going to sound controversial, but I honestly think over the years I've been in sittings and situations where I can cry, I can talk about my emotions, and all the women in that space were like, "Oh my God, you're such a rare thing." I honestly think the bar's been set so low for men, so low that we're not even trying, and that we don't know that actually with some bigger effort, there's a whole way of being which is so much better than we are. But because if we're just like a little bit better than the average man out there, we think we're smashing it. We just think, oh my God, I'm like this. I'm a woke male. What a gift to the women of the world.
This is a really interesting point, because Toby and I often speak about the role of the woman in this being the mirror to the man, and how much resistance men have to being really held up to that responsibility and really helping us step into that integrous space. And I think, one of the biggest things for me is overcoming that defensiveness and actually really sitting with that and going, hey, hold on a second. If we take each person that we encounter in our life as that mirror for us, how can we actually grow more into, like you're saying, into kingship?
I think it's vital. We're in a world where we have to know and we can't be vulnerable. I mean, when the president gets sick in America, I remember Ronald Reagan got a cold once, and they don't want anyone to know. And if they're really ill, they pretend they're not that ill. It's like, we can't run a country and get a cold. All of this programming about being invulnerable. And therefore, I mean, for instance, this polarity movement, which I'm really challenged by, and I think there's some very, very dangerous thinking in it. And I remember when I was in my early 20s, I'm having sex with my girlfriend, or, you know, or not my girlfriend, and I'm all in the passion in the moment of it, you know, and then they might give me an instruction to maybe slow down or touch them to the left, and I remember often I'd be like, you ruined it. We were having such a nice time and you got in your head, and really, I was just worried I was doing it wrong. I felt challenged and threatened by their guidance. I didn't see it as being about them happening to have a preference in that moment. I saw it as being them saying I was getting it wrong and I was shit and I was so ready and so wounded that I completely just, and sometimes it would even be to the point where I'd just stop. I'd stop and like, oh, you blew it. And I would punish them by withdrawing because I couldn't handle it. And this whole polarity movement, which says women have to, the divine feminine submits and should never question, never challenge, never direct, never even make a request, is terrifying. But it, you know, it's like, how can we be defenseless? How can we be open? How can we be like, where do we need to be in our stability to be questioned, and for us to be questioning ourselves as much, to be in the unknown, and to not be rigidly attached to always being seen as being all powerful and all knowing.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it comes back to this idea, because you mentioned Richard Rudd earlier, and what he talks about in the Gene Keys is this kind of like end of sexuality in a way, where the polarities sort of like come together in one being. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I personally find really interesting, because I mean, what you just said with being in your early 20s and feeling very defensive about your sexual performance in a way, and I'm not good enough, I'm not doing it right. I feel kind of like stepping back from that and moving more into sort of safety, because I feel that's part of my exploration at the moment. It's like, man, you know, am I basically outsourcing part of my experience to my partner, mm-hmm. and actually not really taking, let's say, that more feminine part of myself, and looking after that, you know, and being like, today I just have a self-care day and I take a nice bath and a nice walk and make some good food, you know. And it's less about sort of conquering the outside world and more like, man, let's actually just celebrate what we got, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I feel, for me, there is a part of, wow, if I nurture that sort of like feminine qualities of myself more, then I show up more holistically, mm-hmm. rather than basically needing someone to outsource that part of my being too, you know?
Agreed. You'll hear a lot about people saying, I need my, like the polarity movement is like, you need to be this way as a feminine and then your masculine will turn up. It's like, if my kingship is dependent on anything, it's not kingship, right? It's temporary, right? I'm still in my wounded prince, right? Now, is it true that the vibes can enhance each other? Sure, but it's like, if my woman needs me to provide for her so that she can surrender to spirit, that's bullshit. That's a temporary holiday. That's not real connection to spirit. That's fucking, it's like, I'll pay your rent whilst you relax. That's not power. That's not femininity. It's like, that's not the whole story. But I also don't want it to be this idea that it's like, the masculine is mad and the feminine soothes, right? And it's like, what's the beautiful grace of the divine masculine? To me, it's like it's this kind of like, well, you've got masculinity, brackets, toxic, or graceful, beautiful, feminine, you know? And it's like, the feminine has soothed me and healed me and taught me so much. And I want to be able to be fluid between those movements, right? But it's like, I want to articulate what is divine about the masculine capabilities that have been so distorted, you know, in our world and so overused, you know. But I agree about this coming together of this archetype. Me and my partner, we've been kind of playing with this phrase called the elemental. And the elemental is beyond conditioning, beyond identity. They turn up in the moment and they are able to go with that moment. They may suddenly find themselves chopping the head off someone who means to harm their loved ones, or they may be able to, you know, weep and break open to the mysteries of the universe in their greatest vulnerabilities. And it's like, I know on a good day or a good week, I can find myself both deeply masculine and deeply feminine and moving through them rapidly, and not being identified with either or fixed in either. And I think there's something about men doing men's work, women doing women's work, and raising this vibration of what we know, raising the articulation of what we know, so that we can then turn up in each moment with a very deep access to both flavors mixed within us as and when we require them, you know?
I always say that the most important thing is trying to facilitate your partner's freedom, and I think, you know, stepping into owning both that masculine and feminine in yourself is going to facilitate your partner's space as well. And I think it's beautifully put, absolutely beautifully put.
I think what I'd love to look a bit more at, Thomas, like what are like the tools that you have found on your path into more this like kingship, servant leadership? I mean, it's kind of interesting because it's also a bit sort of like business lingo, you know, like when I was at Toastmasters, you know, I was a path of servant leadership. It's like, cool, awesome, you know, that's beautiful. That I feel in a way these ideas are infused into our society so much, but the question is like, how do we embody it?
Well, I mean, how frank can we be on this? Because I've kind of made a commitment.
Full honesty, man.
To be like fully honest.
As frank.
Okay, good to know. Okay, so, you know, I'll tell you about some of the things, you know, that I've been doing, right? And so playing with the different flavors, playing with the different themes. Essentially, if you ask me to give you one answer, is my greatest passion in the world, like, for me, healing is inner child healing, right? It's like there is things that happen to us when we were younger, when we were developing, that we don't process well. And so that means we have trapped in our body painful, negative emotions. And those trapped emotions add to our stress, add to our strain. They affect our perceptual filter. They make us more likely to be angry, more likely to be possessive, more likely to be sad, more likely to be exploitative, to feel like we have to do those things. And so for me, it's like going on an active journey to find the trauma in your body and lovingly and carefully and gently, beautifully release it. Then dissolving the limiting beliefs we created about ourselves, which I'm not good enough. You know, I'm not okay. The world won't meet my needs. All women are bitches. All men are bastards. All of that stuff is what co-opts us and keeps us in fear and keeps us in a sense of control and disrupts our direct connection to unconditional love and causeless happiness. And so for me, spirituality and therapy are exactly the same thing. Any spirituality that doesn't have therapy in it is a blunt tool that gets people very excited about being awesome, but gives them no mechanism to change their actual personality, right? And the psychology that has no spirituality in it has all the tools of being able to change, but just empowers people to be part of the problem that exists in the world because they're not connected to heart or nature or getting any happy because they don't understand that happiness is about spirit, right? So it's the same thing. And I credit Almas, A.H. Almas, for that. He was like, psychology, spirituality, same thing. So I think everyone understanding that in our natural state, we are loving and happy. And if we make choices from love and happiness, and we value love and happiness in a real way, in a tangible way, I don't want to get the bill at the end of my meal in a restaurant, see they've left off the desserts, and walk away giggling that I've got away with not paying for my fucking food. I will call them over and say, I'm sorry, you've left off the desserts. And they were like, oh, that's amazing of you. It's like, it's amazing that that's rare.
It's the loss of integrity. There's a real loss of integrity.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that guy. If I travel on a train and the ticket guy hasn't found me, I will find him and I'll pay for my train. Because I want to go to bed being proud of who I am and how I live. Because when someone like trolls me online, I'm just going to be able to breathe easy into that. When my partner freaks out and decides I'm a terrible human and tells me so, I'm going to hold steady while she loses her way and know that the next day she's going to wrap her arms around me and say, sorry, I lost it. You know, it's like it's not what we do, it's how we turn up. And it's like, how do we keep just fine tuning our integrity, but also being really gentle with ourselves when we're out of our integrity? You know, and the terrible things that we can do, you know, and when we lose our way, you know, it's like, so there are really simple things. Do your healing, do your work. But for me, the thing that was most powerful, the reason why this polarity movement is taking force is because women are so tired of overly feminized, overly sensitive, overly vulnerable men who are like, I don't know, what do you want to do? Not making decisions, not being in their balls. And it's like, it's boring. It's not sexy and it's not good. And I was that guy. I got super conscious and I got super delicate and I got super like, oh, I don't know, what do you want to do? I don't want to, blah, 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 blah. Let's do, and it was just like, so for me, the great blessing of me and my partner is we've done some really weird sexual role play. It's been incredible. It's been so empowering. And it's been about embracing my shadow aspects and giving them space, letting them breathe. It's like, we've done some very, very strange things, and it's been amazing, and it's like my favorite. It's like the flip side of me is like completely exploitative cult leader. I mean, it's like close. So, we've done some incredible role plays of the way in which the manipulative spiritual teacher would take a devotee and convince them it was for their spiritual betterment to have sex with them, right? Right. Now, I think having role played that, I don't think I'm going to do that, right? Because I don't want to be that guy. But I tell you what, it's fun playing with that power. It's fun playing with that power. Okay. And it's terrible, but it's like, because I've expressed it, I'm not afraid of it. I'm not pretending it. It's like, I know. It's like, there's nothing wrong with the part of me that wants to fuck every single woman in the world and make her pregnant. That's just normal. That's my biological desire to try and spread this genetic code as widely as possible and to fight anyone in my way. How do I make sure that I'm a decent human? Is by being fucking honest about that. Really honest about that. And not just being honest about it and suppressing it, but actually putting my arms around it and saying, you're a primal caveman and I love you. And I will actually let you, where there is consent and play, have a bit of space to run with some of that energy so you can have a bit of a release of that aspect of you, which is a true part of you, which is grounded in an evolutionary impulse, which is whole and good, which is not very civilized. It's not very civilized.
It's a nice way of putting that. That really makes me reflect on myself growing up, where it was really this duality of you can't be one and you can't be the other. You can't be the hypersensitive and you can't be the raging hormone, as you said, that wants to penetrate everything that walks. But it was only the point of true acceptance of all these shadow aspects of myself that eventually you start to flourish and actually meet the world very differently. And I think one of the difficult things for me probably, and I see with a lot of men as well, is the asking of the partner, to engage with them. And as you're pointing out with the role play, I think it's a beautiful way of doing things, and we can tap into. It's almost a little bit like constellation therapy in a way, where we really step into all these different personas and meet all those aspects.
Yeah,
but there's a massive fear.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, but also, to create, it's been me and my partner, we celebrate each other's darkness, and so we have a very, very open place where it's like, oh, I had a dark thought. She's like, go on. It's like, I don't know. I just, and I will express something, it's hyper-violent. Truth is, as a father, I found, because I hadn't processed my own vulnerability. So I used to be pretty supportive, even in my early 20s, pretty nice guy, pretty supportive. But when my partner was ill, because I hadn't processed my own vulnerability, their vulnerability made me feel repulsed. So I have a history of doing some pretty terrible things whilst my partners were ill, and they couldn't understand it. You're a nice person, but when I'm ill, you're awful. Now, I have learned how to manage that response and not act from that place, right? Yeah, it's still there. And I know it's to do with my vulnerability and my illness. But when I first had children, truth is, I had a very shadow, dark side around finding the vulnerability and the dependence of my children just terrifying and also revolting. And I was and so I would have these fantasies of destroying them, because it was just like, oh God, if I'm so worried I'm going to drop them on the head, I'd rather just chuck them in the bin and be done with it, And I remember I told my then wife about these feelings, and she freaked out. She freaked out, and she was worried about leaving me with the baby. No, it didn't get to that point, but she expressed, "Are you safe to be left with the baby?" And it was so annoying. It was so annoying because I was like, I'm never going to do it. This is not a kind of a voice telling me to hurt the baby. This is just me dealing with some really complex feelings.
But you needed to voice it.
Yeah. Right. And because I couldn't, that was hard. And so I love that with my partner now, it's like last night we just, we I did inner child work on her last night. She did us a really powerful piece on me. And then we ended up having some, very, very strange power play kind of sex that was really healing, it was really healing. And it's like, it's helping people feel certain enough in their love, and it's like, it's realizing the healing power of sex and the healing power of sexual energy. And the fact our embodiment in our ethics and our integrity is all about feeling really good. Spinoza said, blessedness is not the reward of virtue, it's virtue itself. It's because it feels so good to be virtuous. I'm able to control my lusts. I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, I don't control them from fear. It's like, I don't want to feel bad tomorrow because feeling good feels so good. I want to stay in my integrity. It's like, it's tapping into that, it's like, I don't drink alcohol. I haven't got anything against alcohol, but how I feel after I've drunk it is nowhere near as good as how I feel when I don't, right? So when someone says, hey, would you like this drink? What they're offering me is feeling pretty rough for 3 days. And I'm like, no, I don't want to feel rough for 3 days. And like my connection to the wisdom of the world has been severed. I think I'll have a lime soda, right? Or one of these now delicious alcohol-free beers that are cropping up everywhere. It's like, I ultimately am a hedonist. Like I'm seeking pleasure. And yet for me, that naturally takes you towards emotional intelligence, and it naturally takes you towards alignment and consciousness, because that's where the good stuff is,
And that hedonistic nature can also really help you embrace the darker side of things, the more painful side of things, because the outcome is spectacular when you endure that and really learn how to sit with that space. That's what I found for me.
Yeah. Well, this is where the divine masculine comes in, right? The divine masculine's ability to analyze, to conceptualize, to codify, to create distinction, and to articulate it. And it's like, and of course, this is not about man, woman. There are women out there that can do that. They've been that masculine power, It's like, I had a conversation with Maya Luna, which I just posted recently. Highly recommend you guys watch it. She's immense, but our conversation was incredible. But sometimes you'll see her in conversation. She has to take time because she doesn't have the words, because the wisdom is embodied. And for her, it's non-verbal. And you see her she's a poet and she's a wordsmith, so she can then, articulate brilliantly. But that's how she defines the divine masculine, the ability to understand, to reason, to think, to apply, to take action in alignment with that stuff. I'm just going to shut my door because my kids are kicking off downstairs. And so I will spend so much time in contemplation, really feeling into, am I triggered? Is this past content? Is this because I'm out of alignment today? Like, these are the things of divinity. These are the things of the divine masculine. These are superpowers. And I think when they're turned towards our movement, if we used our intelligence, to make it so that fear wasn't running our choices, that's the, with love, care, kindness, contribution, these values, that's what's going to pop these little distinctions, I think.
Yeah, I feel what really struck me in what you just shared is this piece around celebrating the darkness and creating these containers effectively. So for me, I noticed there's a lot of power that I want to alchemize, and so I started doing Krav Maga last year, and I haven't done it for a few months, and I really noticed I don't have that container to just have that physical okay, this is combat, and then you leave that container and it's all good. And I noticed it sort of bleeds into other areas, and so it's one of my big goals, get back into jujitsu or Krav Maga or something where that just chopping head off type energy is welcomed and held, Yeah. And so I feel what you said with the containers to celebrate the darkness, especially in the relationship context.
Yeah. I'd
be curious with a bit more specifics, how do you celebrate the darkness? Because I feel that is really where relationships heal.
All right. Well, let's go there. Okay. So, there are different things you can do, right? And so looking at what you would consider to be wrong. So one of the golden rules for me, right? One of the golden rules, if you are in a position of power, especially as a facilitator of any kind really, but a teacher of spirituality, you are in a very powerful position, and people project and deify you massively, and it's across the whole world. I mean, it's standard for male yoga teachers to sleep with their students. It's completely inappropriate. For the extraordinary amount of male spirituality teachers that have been exposed over the last 5 years is harrowing and terrifying, and I understand why. Because when you're in that position and people are looking at you with their starry eyes, and you're helping them have these massive breakthroughs, and they project that you have a purer conduit to the divine, right? We find attractive that which we want in ourselves. If you think back to the people who've been in teaching positions, even if they're not what you would normally go for, you feel a massive draw because your soul is like, what they've got, I want. It's a signpost. And you can completely exploit that. You can completely manipulate people who are in your spiritual community to think it's completely okay to have sex with you. And that's completely inappropriate. They are not consenting. They are not adults making a consenting choice. It's impossible for them to know. That's why I get so concerned about sexological bodywork, where the practitioners are being sexual with their clients. Not because it is
surrogates.
No, not surrogates. So different to surrogates. So a surrogate is, I would be your therapist, right? And I would say, you've got these issues with your mother, right? So I'm going to set you up with this woman who's also a therapist, but she's a sexual surrogate. And she undermines, I'm your therapist. You don't fuck me, right? You fuck her, and she's under instructions. And you only do it 6 times. You maximum time 6 times. And then she will be there to support you through these issues, right? Amazing. I think that work is so powerful. Sexological body work is like, you have an issue with sex, I will be sexual with you, and we'll work this out together. And it could be 50 sessions. Now, I'm not saying that can't be incredibly powerful healing work. Totally could be. But the risks of transference, exploitative consent, that it goes through the fucking roof. And therefore it gets to a point where I'm like, the risks are so big, I'm not sure it's okay.
The idea of the erotic transference is something that very, very seldom is it touched on. And, you're looking at sex coaching programs and things like that. And it really does need to be something very central. I mean, I've been very lucky in my early stages of my career to have met an incredible Jungian psychiatrist. And I still remember his words to this day. And he said to me, you will find most healing through the erotic transference, and without fail, that is proven correct every single time. Yeah. But it's like, even this conversation kind of sparks up those memories of a young therapist, and it's like, shit, I was afraid of that. As you say, the eyes start glimmering, and it's like, how do I navigate that space? Even though and thankfully there's good supervisors as well, but it's something that we do need to be more conscious of. But
yeah, counter-transference as well. You think, you feel their feelings as you're like, oh my God, I'm falling in love with my client. Maybe we should do something, and it's like, so, for me, it's like me and my partner, I mean, we role play it out. We do the whole thing, and we've done it to the point where we come to a therapy room and we're like, oh, and then I'm like, oh, I just think you're a bit rigid, about these things. I think you should relax a bit. And we got this whole thing. It's mainly talking. The sex is so hot, it doesn't last that long. It's like 40 minutes of me like basically hypnotizing her to think it's a good idea to sleep with a therapist, right? Why do we do that? Because it gives me that place where I am tempted to do that with people who have them, because they're all like, oh, and it's not healthy, it's not okay, but it's there. It's a vibe that's there, and it's a very sexy vibe. That's the truth. It's like they adore me, and I've completely changed the world. They get to have sex with what they believe is at least some kind of demigod. Delusional, obviously, but that's what they're feeling. Their soul's like, you're a source of divinity, right? Just because you're channeling that doesn't mean it's you, right? But their soul is like, eat that thing because you'll be closer to God, right? So then, you can totally flip that to the other thing, right? Yeah. But I mean, we can go more Freudian. So one kind of role play, which is if you have a partner who's willing. So the other thing is my partner will do oneness kind of priestess work where she's like, take me like every woman you've ever wanted. I'm all of them. They're here with me. I am them. We're all connected. So if there's that girl at school you wanted, take her now in me. It's not fantasy. It's not fantasy. It's not that. It's not pretending. It's connecting.
Embodiment.
But where that gets weird, I mean, according to Freud, Who does every little boy want to sleep with?
Goes down the incestuous path and the Oedipus complex,
All of that.
all the way down there.
Yeah. So we did that once. I don't need to do that again. You know, just, you know, we did that once. Don't need to do it again. It was kind of weirdly wrong. It was very wrong. It was also felt like, it's like, you know what? This is, you know, there was a slight part of the territorial proprietorialism thing is wanting to be able to say, done that, right? So many men who haven't got awareness, and this I see heartbreaking at all, is they think they're in love. You know, they say men look for love when all they want is sex, and women look for sex when what they really want is love. Gross gender generalizations. But what I see men doing who don't have awareness is they get these crushes and they romanticize them, and then they love bomb, and all they really want to do is have sex. And when they have sex, really that was it. There wasn't a deeper connection there, and they didn't really have a desire for a deeper connection, but they didn't know that. And some of them just play it like that, and they manipulate from the beginning, right? But actually, most of those people, they're kind of romanticizing it inside themselves, and then they have sex, and it's like, oh, well, actually, I'm not more interested. That's awful, you know. So for me, it's like let's get much better at being able to understand what's happening. You know, let's get all the weird Freudian stuff out of your system. Let's get all the weird rapey stuff out of your system. Let's get the body work from all the trauma. The other thing, for me, we've all experienced sexual trauma. You know, it's like whether we've had sex with someone and the touch wasn't consenting for us, or whether we did it because we felt we ought to, or we're having sex with our ex for 4 months after we really wanted to even be with them, or when people were saying yes to us, but it was really a no. That's toxic for us too. When you really understand consent, you never ever want anyone to go over their consent to get anything you want, right? It's because it's bad for you too, right? So we've all had these merged, negative, weird things, and our sexual energy is incredibly fragile. Our masculine energy on some levels can be robust and wants to penetrate the world, but actually the core of our sexuality is delicate. And as men, I've had to go back and go, fuck me, I really hurt myself with unconscious sexual process for years, and it's in my body. So getting body work, you know, so yeah, you know, playing out with your dark fantasy partner, you know, role play having sex with your mother, very, very healing, you know, getting the body work on your body, and then getting really, really clear on what is not acceptable fucking behavior. Like doubling down on your definition of integrity. When when my first marriage broke down, I realized there's a bunch of fucking hokey stuff I was doing. I had this whole parallel life flirtation where I connect with someone. I was never planning on doing anything, but I'd want to get to a place where it was like, wow, we get on really well. Well, if I was in a parallel life, who knows? You know, maybe we could have been together. You know, boom, I've virtual fucked them, right? I don't even need to get naked, right? Easy. Next, right? Awful. But what was interesting was, and that kind of got discovered, it kind of came out, and it was kind of really embarrassing. When it came out, I hated myself. Then I realized, how fucking awful is that? Like, I witnessed it. Why do I care more when there are witnesses other than me? Why can't I be the fiercest witness to my integrity? Why can't I, like, if I know I'm doing that, I should be beating myself up. Why did I only beat myself up when other people found out? It's like I only noticed then. And it's like, yeah, no, that's not okay. That's emotional infidelity, you know? If you're confiding in another person about your frustrations about your partner, well, that's really not appropriate. That's leaky as hell, right? There are these fine tunings things that we do, which is basically saying in subtle ways, I'm not satisfied with my partner in this quadrant, and it's an invitation. So with me and my partner, we call it the fly on the wall. And it's like, if my partner was a fly on the wall in any and every situation I find myself in, would she be happy with my behavior? Someone once said, if every email you ever write was written 50 foot tall in the sky for everyone to see, would you still be happy to press send? You know? It's that same kind of thing. And I think it's been a long, long time since the majority of men were even thinking in these kind of ways.
Yeah, it's interesting that we come back to these leaky behaviors. So what are the ways where masculine energy is leaky from your perspective?
Well, I mean, that example there, and one specifically in terms of, well, so for me, in terms of financially, people's looking for an angle, they're looking for a discount. Even sometimes they're driving people down on price, or they're exploiting people in negotiation tactics. They're skipping, paying for something if they can. The train ticket guy hasn't caught them and they think that's a bonus, or they haven't put the desserts on the menu and they laugh thinking they've just, got a little tip there. It's like all of that stuff is incredibly bad for your psychological, spiritual, and mental health. It's an attrition of integrity, which plays out. If you're doing that there, then you're going to be doing that everywhere, and it massively affects your sense of abundance. So for me, it's like, and resisting salespeople, resisting judging that. It's like, in a world of abundance, which is circulation, it's like, pitch me. I'm in it. Pitch me. Come to me with an idea. Like, tell me what you would like to charge me to help me be a better human or help my business better. Come and tell me. I'm all ears. I mean, I say yes a lot, right? Pitch me, right? It's like people complain about people pitching them. It's like, well, that's what makes the world go around. I'm going to pitch people. Also faux modesty. I used to realize if you were doing a workshop, you guys, I'd be like, I would rave more to my friends about what you guys do than I might have about my own, because I don't want to come across as arrogant or it's bullshit. It's like, I want to be able to speak passionately, but without exploitation. So there's so much around the realm of financial integrity and masculine power and abundance. In relationship, it's about, what are your agreements? So my agreements with my partner are, we are polyvivacious. So we like to be lively, vibrant beings, and we're allowed to go about the world being in our full awesome self, and to have people get, rock hard and soaking wet around our energy, right? But if we're doing it because we need that to feel good about ourselves, that's outside of our agreements. If we're doing it for validation, it's bullshit and it's leaky and it's dangerous for us. But if we're doing it because we love to be self-expressed, and that means being flirtatious and juicy and alive, and people want to fuck us because of our glory, that's cool. And we can walk away going, smashed it. That was awesome. That's fine. That's healthy. It's these little distinctions, It's like, you speak to my partner, she'll start talking about Tantra within about 3 minutes. Because she just wants you to know that she's a complete hot pants, which she is, and she's awesome. And I see men going, ooh, and she's just, it's easy for her and it's lovely and she likes it, right? And she's just enjoying herself, it's being tantalizing, right? She doesn't need that to feel good about herself.
So basically there's like emotional leakiness, financial leakiness, and then relationship leakiness. So those are the kind of big three that you're looking at.
Well, I think an emotional leakiness, for me, that's self-awareness around, I'm angry. You made me angry. No, you're kind of responsible for how you're feeling. Unless your boundaries are being transgressed, then, someone's hitting you, that anger is their fault, right? But also it's like, I'm feeling this. It's like, well, you're not really. You think you're being bullied, but actually you haven't dealt with the fact your dad bullied you when you were 5. So you're projecting that shit everywhere. So that's emotional leakiness. It's psychological leakiness. It's like, I don't really know who I am, and I don't really know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I don't understand why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And I'm thinking it's something over here, but it's not. For me, the great leakiness for me was my boundary fitness. So physical fitness is how quickly you can go to a full heart rate and return to your normal resting heart rate, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, emotional fitness is how quickly you can go into a rageful anger and then return to love, right? It's the return. Boundary fitness for me is like, someone would say, can you give me a lift to the airport? And it was a no, right? But I didn't know that. So I'd say yes. And then 3 months later, I'd be like, oh man, right? Boundary fitness is knowing in the moment the truth of who you are and what you want and what you're willing to say yes or no to, and having the courage to say it, right? That's been huge for me. It's like men have got confused and have been weakened, and they've gone from being servant leaders to codependent lapdogs, right? Where they're like, oh, well, I'll do anything to make you happy. It's like, well, that's not going to work. And so it's like, it's like so many men are actually harboring massive resentment and resistance because they are overgiving, actually. It's not, and actually that doesn't work for their women or their partners, because it's just not vibrant, it's not vital, and they can't actually trust them. Because if you don't have a solid no, then your yes isn't true. You can't be trusted to be true. So there's this flakiness. The other thing is just, you know, and I think these are really powerful, important traits for men. It's like, do what you say you will do.
And be impeccable to your word.
Yeah. Like, you know what, nowadays we're like, oh, this is really important. So I'm going to ask you something, like, will you give me your word on that? It's like, that's the word should be just the words you say, not for special commitments, right? Our words should reflect the truth. And I know when I got really, really committed to understanding, like telling the truth, it was painful to realize how much, if I was running 10 minutes late or 7 minutes late, I'd say, sorry, I'm running 5 minutes late. It's like, it's a fucking lie. It's a fucking lie. What am I doing? I'm ameliorating the annoying truth. I'm still going to arrive late. I mean, it's a ridiculous practice. But as I got better at it, it was like, wow, actually, there's exaggerations, there are diminishments, and there is, of course, the delusions. Like, if I don't know the truth because I'm defending against something, how can I reflect it honestly, you know? And so there's so much for us to think about around that, the integrity piece. That's where we find our freedom. It's where we find our blessedness, because then it doesn't matter if we get the girl or we get the job or we lose the contract, because we go to bed, put our head on the pillow at night and feel proud of who we've been. And I think, as I have been feeling more of that, and you go back and clean up the mistakes that you've made and the times you've been unfaithful, or the times when you have been out of your integrity, you know, it's like my first job when I was 22, they underpaid me horribly. And I signed up at that rate and I was running the business. And then I just started taking I worked out a way of being able to get money out of the business without being noticed. Probably wasn't a lot, but much to their surprise, I called them up about 3 years ago and went, I owe you some money, you know? And it's like, and it was incredibly painful to go and admit that to them, and also fucking felt amazing. Felt amazing.
That's so powerful. Wow. And
so for me, it's like, where did you lose love for yourself by being out of integrity in the past, and how can you go and clean that up? Buying back our souls as humans, but as men, claiming our power, claiming our integrity. I also think, I can think of so many times when I have been in the company of men and men have disappointed me bitterly by saying something sexist or inappropriate or just below fucking standard. And I just haven't said, you know what, that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable, brother. You know, because it's in my head, it's not been my job to educate people. It's not my job. I might just politely not hang around with them as much, but I don't think that's good enough in today's world. I think we need to make a commitment to hold each other to account and be willing to confront inequality and prejudice and sexism, racism, where we find it. And we have a responsibility not to call it out, but as my friend Matt Liam Gardner says, is to call it forward. Call it forward.
That's beautiful.
Tom, it's been amazing. Thank you so much.
It's been an education.
Thank you. Good, you know, just to give me a chance. You know, I'm learning whilst I'm speaking, and it's interesting because it's like I'm realizing, you know, how much passion I have for this subject. I'm really excited. I'm definitely don't have all the answers in this field, but it just feels so important right now. So it's so exciting to be connecting with so many people are now going, oh, okay, what does this look like and how do we do it? So thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you.
Well, thank you for sharing the space with us. Yeah.
So heart-centric. So for everyone who's listening, we're putting the links to Tom's work in the description. And Tom, if you want to share the link to the Good Men quiz.
Yes.
We'll happily
masculine IQ test, right? Because for me, the statement is a wise man is a good man. It's the quickest way to be happy. It's the quickest way to get rich, right? With integrity, right? And so yes, please we need some beta testers. Take the test. Let me know if any questions really annoy you. Let me know if there are any questions that need to be added. And also let me know if you feel the score is fair. It's a tough test. I got 280 out of 360. So anything above 225 is pretty good, right? Anything above 250, I'd say is solid, but it's like I'm using it to inspire me to get above 300 in the next 6 months. So let me know how you get on.
Absolutely. We'll share it on all our platforms as well.
Thank you.
Right, beautiful humans. We'll see you all soon. Lots of love.
Be well.
Much love.